Gilles de Rais is remembered as one of history's earliest and most notorious serial killers, a man whose life began with honor but ended in horror. Born in 1405 into a wealthy and powerful French family, Gilles grew up with immense privilege. After losing his parents at a young age, he inherited vast estates, making him one of the richest nobles of his time. His education and military training gave him both intelligence and discipline, setting him up for a remarkable career. During the Hundred Years' War, Gilles rose to fame as a respected soldier. He fought courageously against the English and even served alongside the legendary Joan of Arc. For his bravery, he was awarded the prestigious title of Marshal of France, one of the highest military honors. To many, he appeared to be a national hero. But after Joan of Arc's execution in 1431, Gilles' life took a dark turn. Retiring from military service, he began living a life of excess, spending enormous amounts of money on theater, luxury, and entertainment. His reckless lifestyle pushed him toward financial ruin, and at the same time, his behavior grew increasingly strange and dangerous. It was during this downfall that Gilles turned to occult practices. He reportedly performed dark rituals, seeking wealth and power through sorcery. Soon after, rumors began to spread about missing children near his estates. Witnesses later testified that Gilles abducted, tortured, and murdered countless young boys, deriving sadistic pleasure from their suffering. Historians estimate his victims may have numbered in the hundreds. For years, his noble status allowed him to escape suspicion. But in 1440, a financial dispute with the church led to a deeper investigation. Authorities discovered horrifying evidence, including the remains of children at his properties. Gilles was arrested and charged with murder, sodomy, and heresy. Despite his high rank, he was found guilty. On October 26, 1440, Gilles de Rais was executed by hanging and burning, bringing an end to his reign of terror. Today, his story remains one of the most chilling examples of how a celebrated hero can become one of history's darkest villains. Herman Webster Mudgett, better known as H. H. Holmes, is often called America's first serial killer, a man whose crimes shocked the nation in the late 19th century. Holmes was born in 1861 in New Hampshire to a strict and troubled household. From an early age, he showed signs of unusual behavior, including a fascination with death and anatomy. Despite these dark tendencies, Holmes was intelligent and ambitious. He studied medicine and eventually earned a degree, which gave him knowledge he would later twist into sinister acts. In the 1880s, Holmes moved to Chicago, where his charm and intelligence helped him gain work as a pharmacist. Soon, he began building what would later be called his murder castle. This massive three-story building looked like a hotel from the outside, but inside it was designed with hidden passageways, soundproof rooms, trapdoors, and even a gas chamber. For Holmes, it became the perfect place to carry out his horrific experiments. During the 1893 World's Fair in Chicago, thousands of visitors came to the city, and many of them checked into Holmes's hotel. They never checked out. Holmes would lure victims, often women seeking jobs or travelers looking for a cheap stay, into his castle, where he tortured, killed, and in some cases, even dissected their bodies. Witnesses later claimed he also sold skeletons and body parts to medical schools for profit. For a time, his crimes went unnoticed, masked by his respectable appearance and business dealings. But suspicions grew as people disappeared and financial frauds tied back to Holmes began to surface. Eventually, authorities uncovered evidence linking him to multiple murders. In 1894, Holmes was finally arrested in Boston, initially for insurance fraud. But as investigations expanded, the scale of his crimes came to light. During his trial, he confessed to killing at least 27 people, though. Albert Fish is remembered as one of America's most disturbing and sadistic serial killers. His crimes were so horrific that even investigators struggled to describe them in full detail. Fish was born in 1870 in Washington, D.C., into a deeply troubled family. His father died when he was just 5 years old, and his mother, unable to care for him, placed him in an orphanage. There, Fish endured severe physical abuse, which shaped his twisted personality. Instead of being repelled by pain, he grew to associate it with pleasure, a dark seed that would later define his life. As he grew older, Fish worked odd jobs and tried to live a normal life, even marrying and having 6 children. But behind closed doors, his behavior became increasingly disturbing. He developed bizarre obsessions, from self-harm to cannibalistic fantasies. His descent into darkness accelerated when he began targeting vulnerable children, particularly from poor families. Between the 1920s and 1930s, Albert Fish committed a series of horrific crimes. He would lure children with promises of food or work, then abduct, torture, and kill them in unimaginable ways. What made him even more infamous was his sadistic pleasure in not only murdering but also cannibalizing his victims. Authorities believe he may have killed several children, though the exact number remains unknown. For years, Fish managed to hide his crimes, but in 1928, after the disappearance of a young girl named Grace Budd, his trail began to unravel. Fish had convinced her parents to let her accompany him to a party, but she never returned. Later, in a chilling twist, he even sent a letter to the Budd family, describing in detail how he had killed their daughter. This shocking confession finally exposed him. Albert Fish was arrested in 1934 and put on trial. Despite his attempts to claim insanity, the jury found him guilty of murder. He was sentenced to death, and in January 1936 he was executed in the electric chair at Sing Sing prison. Albert Fish's reign of terror ended that day, but his crimes left behind one of the darkest legacies in American criminal history. Jack the Ripper is one of the most infamous serial killers in history, a name that continues to haunt London more than a century later. His identity was never discovered, but his brutal crimes shock the world and remain a mystery to this day. The story begins in 1888 in the crowded streets of Whitechapel, a poor and crime-ridden district of East London. The area was filled with poverty, homelessness, and desperation. Many women there turned to prostitution simply to survive, and it was these women who became the Ripper's targets. Between August and November of 1888, at least 5 women, now remembered as the Canonical Five, were brutally murdered. Their names were Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly. The killer's method was terrifyingly distinct. He would attack his victims in the dark alleys, slit their throats, and mutilate their bodies in horrific ways. Some of the crimes showed signs of surgical skill, leading investigators to suspect that the killer might have had medical knowledge. The brutality of the murders caused widespread panic in London. Newspapers gave him the chilling name Jack the Ripper after a letter, allegedly written by the killer himself, was sent to the press. Whether the letter was genuine or not, the name stuck, and the legend grew. Despite massive police investigations, the Ripper was never caught. Dozens of suspects were questioned, ranging from local butchers and doctors to wealthy aristocrats, but none were ever proven guilty. His ability to vanish into the shadows after each murder left both the police and the public terrified and frustrated. By the end of 1888, the murders suddenly stopped, as mysteriously as they had begun. To this day, theories continue to circulate about the Ripper's true identity, but no definitive answer has ever been found. Jack the Ripper's reign of terror lasted only a few months, but his crimes have left an unforgettable mark on history, making him one of the most feared and mysterious serial killers of all time. Harold Shipman, known as Dr. Death, is considered one of the most prolific serial killers in modern history. Unlike most killers, he didn't stalk dark alleys or abandoned houses. He operated in plain sight, as a trusted doctor. Born in 1946 in Nottingham, England, Shipman grew up in a working-class family. His mother's painful battle with cancer had a lasting effect on him. As a teenager, he often witnessed her being treated with morphine for relief. This experience may have influenced his later crimes. Shipman became a respected physician, first working in hospitals and later running his own practice. To his patients, he appeared professional, caring, and dependable. But behind this mask of trust, he was secretly killing those who relied on him most. His method was chillingly simple. He would administer lethal doses of morphine or diamorphine to mostly elderly women, then calmly record false causes of death on their certificates. Many families never suspected foul play because Shipman was their doctor, someone they believed without question. For years, suspicions lingered, but were dismissed. It wasn't until 1998 when a local undertaker noticed the unusually high number of Shipman's patients dying in similar circumstances that alarms were raised. Investigators discovered shocking evidence: forged wills, falsified medical records, and a disturbing pattern of deaths directly connected to Shipman. In 2000, Harold Shipman was convicted of murdering 15 of his patients, but later inquiries suggested his true victim count could be far higher. Estimates range between 215 to possibly over 250 deaths, making him one of the deadliest serial killers ever recorded. Shipman was sentenced to life imprisonment with no chance of parole. However, in 2004, he was found dead in his prison cell, having hanged himself just one day before his 58th birthday. The case of Harold S. Hitman remains terrifying because it shattered the ultimate trust, the bond between doctor and patient. His story is a chilling reminder that sometimes the most dangerous killers don't hide in the shadows. They wear a white coat. The Zodiac Killer is one of the most infamous and mysterious serial killers in American history. Active in California during the late 1960s and early 1970s, his identity remains unknown to this day. The Zodiac first struck in December 1968, when a young couple was shot near Vallejo, California. Just 7 months later, another couple was attacked at Blue Rock Springs Park. The man survived, but the woman was killed. Soon after, a chilling phone call was made to the police, with the caller admitting responsibility. This was only the beginning. Over the next several years, the Zodiac claimed responsibility for multiple murders, across Northern California. His known victims were usually young couples in secluded areas, but he also attacked a taxi driver in San Francisco. The brutality of the crimes and his ability to disappear without leaving a trace made him nearly impossible to catch. What set the Zodiac apart from other killers was not only his violence, but also his obsession with publicity. He began sending letters to newspapers, filled with threats, strange symbols, and cryptic ciphers. Some of these ciphers have never been solved, while others revealed chilling messages, including his boast of killing dozens of people. In his letters, he taunted the police, mocked their inability to catch him, and even gave himself the nickname Zodiac. The media frenzy surrounding the case spread fear throughout California. People became terrified to go out at night, and the Zodiac's coded messages kept the public and investigators on edge. At one point, he even threatened to attack a school bus, which sparked panic across the state. Despite years of investigation, the Zodiac was never identified. Over 2,500 suspects were questioned, including Arthur Lee Allen, one of the most well-known names connected to the case, but no conclusive evidence was ever found. The killer's last confirmed letter came in 1974, after which he seemed to vanish. The Zodiac killer's reign of terror left at least 5 confirmed victims, though he claimed many more. His identity remains one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in criminal history, ensuring that the legend of the Zodiac lives on. Andrei Chikatilo, often called the Butcher of Rostov, is remembered as one of the most terrifying serial killers in Soviet history. His crimes shocked the nation and exposed deep flaws in the Soviet justice system. Chikatilo was born in 1936 in Ukraine, during a time of famine and hardship. His childhood was filled with poverty, hunger, and trauma, including the loss of family members during World War II. Shy and socially awkward, he struggled with relationships from an early age. Later, he worked as a teacher and factory employee, living what appeared to be an ordinary life. But beneath this image, Chikatilo was hiding his darkest urges. Starting in the late 1970s, Chikatilo began preying on women and children. He would lure victims to secluded areas such as forests, train stations, and bus stops, often by pretending to offer them food, money, or guidance. Once alone, he brutally assaulted and murdered them, often with extreme violence. Witnesses later described the killings as savage, with signs of both stabbing and mutilation. Over the course of more than a decade, Chikatilo killed at least 52 people, though the true number may have been higher. His victims ranged from young children to teenagers and women. His ability to remain undetected for so long created widespread fear in the Rostov region, where families became terrified to let their children go out alone. The Soviet police initially struggled to solve the case, partly because the authorities refused to admit that a serial killer could exist in the Soviet Union. As a result, innocent people were arrested and even executed, while Chikatilo continued his spree. Finally, in 1990, after years of investigation, Chikatilo was caught when police noticed suspicious behavior near a train station. Evidence tied him directly to several murders, and after his arrest, he eventually confessed in chilling detail to dozens of killings. In 1992, Chikatilo was found guilty of 52 murders. The court sentenced him to death, and in February 1994, he was executed by a single gunshot to the head. Andrei Chikatilo's reign of terror lasted more than a decade, and his crimes remain one of the darkest chapters in Soviet criminal history. David Parker Ray, infamously known as the Toy Box Killer, is considered one of America's most sadistic criminals, whose chilling crimes horrified investigators and the public alike. Ray was born in 1939 in New Mexico. His childhood was troubled, marked by neglect and abuse. From a young age, he developed disturbing fantasies about violence and control, which only grew darker over time. On the surface, Ray appeared like an ordinary man, working as a mechanic and living quietly in a small community. But behind closed doors, he was constructing something horrifying. In a trailer he called his Toy Box, Ray built a soundproof torture chamber filled with tools, chains, medical instruments, and bizarre devices designed to inflict pain. He even installed recording equipment and mirrors to force victims to witness their own suffering. To outsiders, it looked like a simple motorhome, but inside it was a place of unimaginable horror. Ray is believed to have kidnapped and tortured dozens of women over several decades. His method usually involved drugging his victims, chaining them inside the toy box, and subjecting them to days of torment. What made the case even more disturbing was that he would often play a recorded tape to his victims, calmly explaining the torture they were about to endure. Investigators later called this tape one of the most chilling pieces of evidence they had ever heard. For years, Ray managed to avoid suspicion, partly because he lived in a remote area and often targeted vulnerable women. It wasn't until 1999, when one of his victims managed to escape while still wearing a dog collar and chains, that his crimes were exposed. She went straight to the police, and soon after, authorities raided Ray's property, uncovering the terrifying toy box. David Parker, Ray was arrested and charged with multiple counts of kidnapping and torture. However, despite Investigators suspecting he had murdered as many as 60 women. No bodies were ever found. In 2001, he was sentenced to over 200 years in prison, but just 3 years later, in 2002, Ray died of a heart attack behind bars. The Toy Box Killer's story remains one of the most disturbing cases in American criminal history, a chilling reminder of the horrors that can hide behind an ordinary face. John Wayne Gacy, often called the Killer Clown, is remembered as one of America's most notorious serial killers. His double life shocked the nation, as he appeared to be a friendly community man on the outside while hiding unspeakable horrors beneath. Gacy was born in 1942 in Chicago, Illinois. His childhood was troubled, with an abusive father and frequent health problems. Despite these struggles, he managed to build a successful image as an adult. Gacy became a local contractor, a respected businessman, and was even active in politics. But what made him stand out was his strange hobby. He often dressed as Pogo the Clown to entertain children at parties and hospitals. To everyone around him, he looked like a kind and cheerful man. Behind this mask, however, Gacy was living a terrifying secret life. Beginning in the early 1970s, he lured young boys and teenagers to his home with promises of work, money, or friendship. Once inside, Gacy would overpower his victims, subject them to assault, and ultimately kill them. Most chilling of all, he buried many of the bodies in the crawlspace under his own house. For years, Gacy's crimes went unnoticed, as he carefully maintained his public image. But suspicions grew when several young men went missing in the Chicago area. In 1978, the disappearance of a teenager named Robert Peist finally led police to investigate Gacy more closely. During their search, they uncovered the horrifying truth: human remains hidden beneath his home. Investigators eventually discovered the bodies of 29 victims buried in and around Gacy's property, with others believed to have been disposed of elsewhere. The scale of his crimes shocked America, as Gacy's cheerful clown persona became forever linked with evil. In 1980, John Wayne Gacy was convicted of 33 murders, making him one of the most prolific serial killers in U.S. history. He was sentenced to death and spent 14 years on death row. On May 10, 1994, Gacy was executed by lethal injection. The case of John Wayne Gacy remains one of the darkest reminders that evil can hide behind the most ordinary and even friendly facade faces. Dennis Rader, known as the BTK Killer, short for bind, torture, kill, lived a double life that stunned America. For 3 decades, he terrorized Wichita, Kansas, while appearing to be nothing more than an ordinary family man. Rader was born in 1945 in Kansas. His childhood seemed normal on the surface, but even as a young boy, he displayed disturbing behavior. He admitted later that he enjoyed torturing animals and fantasizing about control and bondage. As he grew older, he appeared to live a normal life, serving in the Air Force, marrying, raising 2 children, and even working as a church president and local government employee. To his neighbors, he was polite and respectable. But beginning in 1974, Rader revealed his true darkness. That year, he murdered an entire family, the Notorious, including 2 young children. In chilling fashion, he sent letters to police and newspapers, boasting about his crimes and demanding attention. It was Rader himself who gave his alter ego the name BTK, describing his method of binding, torturing, and killing his victims. Over the next 17 years, Rader killed 10 people in brutal attacks. His victims included women, men, and even children. He stalked his targets carefully, breaking into their homes and carrying out his sadistic fantasies. What made the case especially terrifying was not only the brutality of the crimes, but the fact that BTK taunted authorities through cryptic letters, poems, and packages, enjoying the fear he spread. After 1991, the murders suddenly stopped, and many believed the BTK case had gone cold forever. But in 2004, Rader couldn't resist the urge for attention. He began sending new letters to the media, once again bragging about his past killings. This decision would ultimately lead to his downfall. Investigators traced a floppy disk Rader had mailed, which contained hidden data linking back to his CHU and his personal computer. In 2005, Dennis Rader was arrested, and his horrifying secret life was finally exposed. He confessed in shocking detail to all 10 murders and was sentenced to 10 consecutive life terms in prison without parole. The story of the BTK killer remains one of the most chilling reminders that evil can exist behind the most ordinary faces.